Good morning. Welcome to the first ever MWW Talks, focusing today on LGBT. My name is Stephen Macias. I'm the Senior Vice President. I'm the LGBT Practice Lead here for our firm, MWW, and we're very excited to be launching this new program. Connecting people online, connecting people through this panel is with the idea to arm people with ideas, to spur conversation, and to connect the dots around how it is that we're reaching the LGBT community and what it is that the new landscape around the LGBT community looks like. Today, we are going to be talking about how are LGBT cultural and legal victories changing how businesses reach LGBT consumers. It's been a really exciting couple of years as it relates to advances in the movement, advances into the quality of life, because of many, many people who have been working very hard in the LGBT community and also our allies across the country. There is an argument to be made that culture moves the needle politically, and that the political movement then opens up a business case for what it is that is now the new American landscape, where the majority of Americans are now supporting marriage equality, as an example. So today, we have some really great panelists joining us that are exceptional in their fields, that are moving the needle forward in different areas in the movement, and would like to introduce them briefly and then have them talk to you about their organization, what they do, and how it is that their organization fits into the movement. So the first person is Rich Ferraro, who is the SVP in charge of communications at the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. Rich, hello.
Hey, Stephen.
Hi. The second person on our panel is Stephen Murray, who is the SVP for Integrated Marketing and Branding at the world's largest LGBT media company, Here Media. Hi, Stephen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Love the Boy George behind you, too. And our last panelist today is Jim Halterman, who is the editor of XFINITY.com/LGBT, a really amazing portal of entertainment. And it's good to see you too, Jim, out in Los Angeles.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. So let's actually, rather than me talk about what it is that your guys' world is all about, I'd like to turn over the floor for you all to talk to the audience, and the audience is to see these chats in the future, to talk a little bit about what your organization does, what it is that is happening within the organization, and what it is that you do within the context of those organizations. So, Rich, if you can start us off. Rich Ferraro.
Sure. So I head up programs and communications at GLAAD, the organization formerly known as the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. We actually dropped our full name last year to show solidarity with bisexual and transgender people, where a lot of our work today is. GLAAD is an LGBT advocacy organization that rewrites the script for LGBT equality. There are many LGBT organizations lobbying in courts or lobbying on Capitol Hill, but GLAAD does lobbying in the court of public opinion to build a better and a more inclusive America. I lead a team of former PR staffers, former journalists who are here working at GLAAD to find the stories of LGBT people and allies, and then to pitch out those stories and to create online campaigns and media campaigns to bring those stories that can cause change into the national dialogue. We have a team of folks who specializes on working with the entertainment industry, TV networks and film studios. We have a team that focuses on sports, on transgender issues, and in Spanish language media, as well as national and local news outlets. One area where we're growing at GLAAD over the past year, year and a half is with advertising media as well. We've served as consultants and sounding boards to many global brands who are starting to be inclusive of LGBT people and LGBT images in their mainstream advertising. So we've worked with some of them who are sponsors of GLAAD to kind of build very inclusive and groundbreaking campaigns.
And you have a big event coming up on Saturday, right?
Yes, we do. The 25th anniversary of the GLAAD Media Awards is going to be held Saturday in New York City. We're going to be honoring George Takei. We have special performances by Kylie Minogue and Casey Musgraves, who's an up-and-coming country music star. And then we have some great allies like Naomi Watts and Abigail Breslin, Emmy Rossum, who will be on stage to present some of our categories. The GLAAD Media Awards are our biggest fundraiser of the year to keep the lights on at GLAAD and help in our advocacy work throughout the rest of the year, but they also serve as a benchmark for the media industry, where we're honoring TV networks, news networks, films that are really pushing the envelope in terms of LGBT inclusion.
Awesome. And Rich, the GLAAD Media Awards at the Waldorf Astoria this year, are there still tickets available?
There are still tickets available. Saturday night, Kylie Minogue concert and the best LGBT images in the media. So it'll be a great night.
Great. And they can find that at GLAAD.org, right?
Yep, it's GLAAD.org/media awards.
Awesome. The next person to introduce themselves on our panel is Jim Halterman. Jim, take it away and let us know who you are and what you're all about.
Yeah, I'm an entertainment journalist. A lot of my focus has been on the LGBT community and mostly television, some film and theater. But XFINITY started an LGBT microsite last year, and they brought me on board earlier this year to kind of steer it and bring the content to it. So it's become kind of a mix of everything from, like, today I just posted an interview with Nick Varios, who won Project Runway Under the Gun. But then, the week or two ago when the GLAAD Media Awards were in LA, I had a lot of coverage from that just on the show itself, and I got a lot of great red carpet interviews. So it's a good balance between a lot of different things. And though my focus is usually television, something like the GLAAD Awards, there's so many people that tie into that world, and it can still spread that message about inclusion, tolerance, anything people need to just see that we're out there. And that's been my main focus. And the response is great, because even though some people see a site called LGBT as a niche audience, I hear from everybody. And it's not just gay audience that is looking at that page and looking at the interviews and the posts that I'm doing. Something like The Normal Heart's coming up next month on HBO, and that's already getting a lot of attention, and we'll be doing a lot of focus on that. So, my work has been really busy. It's the nice thing is that there's so much out there. I never have to look very far for what to cover.
It's really exciting. I mean, I worked at GLAAD 2003, 2004, and most of our work at that time was reactionary to storylines or characters that were not showing the LGBT community in a good light, much less having a big amount of characters to be honoring and lauding. And so it's a great change of landscape due to a lot of great organizations like GLAAD. What was your most unexpected or favorite interview on the GLAAD Media Award red carpet in Los Angeles?
I got a kick out of Rita Moreno, who I'm sure Rich got to talk to, but she was just, yeah, you could just tell she was having the time of her life. She had no problem saying how she was dressing for the lesbians, because she had this very butch little leather jacket with little spiky things on the shoulder. And she was just fantastic. And I had a chance to ask her about just how she's seen the landscape change over her career, because she's been around for a while. And she had great things to say, and just how far we've come, and people are getting married now. It's wonderful. So she was probably my favorite, just because, one, I'm a fan, but also she had such great things to say. So it was wonderful.
Yeah, it's good to see that generational cross and that divide being bridged by people like Rita Moreno. I'm very grateful to people like her. By the way, before we get to Stephen Murray, reminding people that you can tweet in your questions at hashtag Mww Talks Lgbt. Stephen Murray, hi there. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Tell us about Here Media, what you do, what the organization is up to.
Absolutely. So Here Media is the largest and most established LGBT-owned and operated media company in the U.S. And our mission is to engage, inform, and educate LGBT people and like-minded and equality-minded individuals. And we publish The Advocate, Out Traveler, HIV+, Here TV, and gay.com and gay.net. So really what we do is we create best-in-class content and really interpret what is going on around the world and what that means to LGBT people. And our mission has really changed a little bit and evolved as kind of the politics and the political landscape have evolved. So, for years, The Advocate was kind of the leading edge of reporting on what was going on with LGBT culture, AIDS, HIV, et cetera, and kind of noting when TV characters, et cetera, were coming on and kind of what that meant. Now, of course, we have all media outlets reporting on what's going on with gay culture, but we remain as kind of what does it mean for gay people, particularly with political landscape in the last year. We interpret it and we explain what it means from a variety of different perspectives and for a variety of audiences. So my role in particular as head of marketing and brand strategy is to really work with advertisers to kind of connect with the LGBT audience. So more and more what we're seeing is that it's not just about a media buy, that's just the beginning. Advertisers want to connect in a 360 experience. So we really partner with them and work with them on creating those experiences and touching LGBT in real and meaningful ways.
What are some of the unexpected sort of big hits from some of your covers last year from The Advocate or out?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, Edie Windsor was on our Out 100 issue. And so, she was certainly the cause celeb of the year. I think she just really embodied what was going on in the kind of political zeitgeist. And she was the main honoree of our Out 100 awards in November. And that was fantastic to have her. Also our sports cover was a hugely popular success. I mean, this year coming up in August, we're going to have Michael Sam on the cover, and that's going to be, really those are things that I think that sports in particular is the next kind of, frontier, sports stars coming out. And so those always get a lot of PR and publicity around us. And then finally, we did a lot of coverage on what was going on in Russia and really sent reporters into the field from Advocate and kind of reported on what was going on behind the scenes. And I think that got a lot of good feedback from our audience, who was really looking for ways of finding out kind of what was life like over there. We kind of told the story through the perspective of kind of love stories, people who were finding and kind of able to to kind of find love in what is a really oppressive society, and there were beautiful photos with it. And I think that really connected with our audience.
Yeah, there's so much great stuff coming out of The Advocate and out, and I think that those common themes that the brands have been finding to connect people, whether they're inside or outside of the community, has been something really spectacular. The conversation that we were having before we went live today was a little bit about sports and how that frontier was not something that those of us who've been in this movement for a while really expected to be talking about or educating ourselves around the advancements of it, whether it's a cover of a sports figure on the cover of Out, or whether it's some really seminal and leading sports organizations that are hosting GLAAD, or it's sports people who are on the red carpet talking to Jim. It's been a really meaningful year in that sports influences so many people, and so many different brands in the advertising agent world are attached to sports. It's something that's really significant. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Let's go ahead and jump to some of our questions if we can. We're going to go ahead and start with Jim. So Jim, you work in the entertainment media space, interviewing people and making sure that the stories that are going on with, like, the Normal Heart or the case against AIDS are kind of front and center. What role has the increased LGBT visibility through media played, in your opinion, in creating positive change for everyday LGBT people across the country?
Well, I think the key word there is visibility. I think the fact that we're seeing so many gay characters, gay storylines, gay people in real life who are part of the mainstream news. I think the fact that those people are out there, it's showing everybody who are in smaller towns or in areas where they might not be exposed to that as much. They're seeing that this is a part of the world now. It's not that special episode or that special character, or, it's funny because I feel like now we're seeing more and more sports people coming out of the closet, and it's becoming a normal thing. It's not as shocking as maybe as it was with that first person or second person. And now it's like, oh, another one, great. It's not so like, oh my God, what's happening? It's like, no, this
that
is
special after school special that play,
yeah.
like your friend who's coming has a special issue and turned out that he was gay. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just did a couple stories on the Vampire Diaries and the Originals, which is a spinoff. They both now have gay vampires on the show, and the focus of their story is not the sexuality part of it. It's trying to stay alive in this vampire culture. But just that alone is just saying a lot to the world, and that it doesn't have to be about them being gay, and it's just mentioned maybe once, and that's pretty much it. I mean, hopefully they'll have romances and things like that, but just the fact that that's out there, I think, is such a big deal. And for people in the mainstream that are watching these shows, they're saying, oh wow, in this world I'm watching and maybe relate to, maybe not the vampires, but just, you know, anything. It's becoming the norm, and I think that's the best thing we can be doing, is just keep putting those messages and images out there so people see it. Like, this is our world. It's not a subculture so much anymore. It's just part of everything. It's that fabric.
So, Stephen Murray, when this visibility with LGBT characters in film and television, how does that affect advertisers over the years? You've been with these brands for many years. How has that affected advertisers' enthusiasm about advertising in the space, and how it is that they're sort of approaching our particular LGBT space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, again, as Jim mentioned, putting a human face on it, and it gives multiple conversation points to discuss with them. I mean, I was fortunate enough to work here 10 years ago, and it was like the excitement around Will and Grace or Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And that was even a rallying point to at least begin the conversation with these advertisers. And at that point, you know, there were some core advertisers in the market, Subaru, Saab, and Saturn, and Absolute. And now, when I came back a year and a half ago, you know, everybody's attention is turned to the LGBT market. And I think a lot of it has to do with the visibility on TV shows, because, you know, again, it puts a human face on it, and you can actually comment and joke on the storylines of Modern Family, or the winner of Project Runway, or, you know, the guest that Andy Cohen brought on, you know. So as more and more people come out, it's just another, you know, again, it becomes more acceptable. And I think more and more advertisers are, you know, it's not necessarily now even reaching out. 10 years ago, I think it was about convincing people of the validity of the gay market. Now, I think all advertisers, or most advertisers, understand that they should reach out to the gay market. It's about how best to do that. And I think that's a huge shift in the last 10 years that we've seen. And I think a lot of it has to do with media visibility.
Well, then that's a perfect segue to Rich at GLAAD. When I worked at GLAAD, the early part of the 2000s, a million years ago, and when I was doing some just looking over again GLAAD's website, and I've noticed that that the mission statement has evolved and is different than when it was when I worked at GLAAD. When I worked at GLAAD, our mission statement was to ensure fair, accurate, and inclusive representation of the LGBT community. And so clearly that the new mission statement, which I'm sure Rich knows better than I do, is an evolution of in the media space. Rich, how is the work that GLAAD has done over the years in encouraging people to see themselves on screen, encouraging studios and networks to show us on screen, encourage advertisers to sort of come out of the closet over the years and join us publicly?
Yeah, I think our work really has evolved in terms of mere representation and accurate representation to now pushing the envelope to really reflect the diversity of the full LGBT community. Our conversations with networks are no longer just about having gay people on, but about having gay people of color, about having gay folks who are starting families, about having transgender people on and sharing their stories. I think if you look at how the media has changed, I think the GLAAD Awards is actually an interesting example where 25 years ago, the first GLAAD Media Awards, the stories that I've heard are that Phil Donahue accepted an award and he's really the only person who would come. And now we're giving awards to shows like The Fosters, which is on ABC Family, a channel that targets young people, and it showcases an interracial female couple raising children. They also have a new character on the show who's a transgender teenager. So GLAAD's work in terms of relationships with networks is really about pushing the envelope and pushing for that diversity. We're also looking at new media outlets and new ways to get LGBT stories out there. I mentioned our Spanish language media program, where we devote a lot of resources to telling the stories of LGBT people on Telemundo and Univision, in places where LGBT stories and LGBT issues are still new. We're also doing a lot more work in terms of Black media and working with Jets and Essence of the world to get them to showcase LGBT couples alongside their straight couples, heterosexual couples in their marriage section. So there are still a lot of firsts that the community has in terms of media representation, and it's about finding them and also identifying those audiences who can still be moved and still have some education and learning to do when it comes to LGBT people.
And so those changes in visibility I know that GLAAD has been working actively in the advertising community, and really focuses on some on highlighting and spotlighting some awards and some of the things that you've done in the past few years. What are some of the examples of the advertisers that you feel like have really sort of grown and evolved with the media space?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think advertising has somewhat come. It's been slower in advertising than on television and in film, but we're at the point now where global and very traditional brands like Coca-Cola, Honey Maid, Chevrolet are including LGBT families in their mainstream advertising,
Right.
and I think that that's very significant. I think it's a reflection of two things. One being the fact that LGBT people are part of the American fabric. So it's about reaching the LGBT consumer, but it's also about reaching people like my mom who have gay family members and who expect to see folks like her son represented in ads. And then it's also a good business decision today. Corporate America's found that it's the right business decision to stand with not only LGBT people, but the majority of Americans who today support their LGBT friends and family as well.
It's a good place to be in our sort of evolution where doing the right thing and growing a company's bottom line profitability are no longer mutually exclusive. And that is that has a lot to do, I think, over the past couple of years with a couple of things that I wanted to touch on today. The repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or getting rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the repeal of DOMA and Prop 8 being struck down for the past couple of years have been, I think, on the list of things that many community leaders across the country said had to happen in order for us to move equality into a fuller place. When you think of programs, Stephen Murray, around your advertisers and what kinds of people they want to represent them at, say, a summer program, have you noticed that the Don't Ask, Don't Tell or DOMA or Prop 8 being struck down is resonating with advertisers or people, places, and things at events? How has the change in those particular legal landscape changed how it is that you guys are doing business?
Yeah, well, I think that the most important thing is the collection of all of those kind of political events, I think, are a reflection of what's going on in American culture. And I think that 7 years ago, when people were polled about, let's say, same-sex marriage, 60% were against it. And last year, 60% were for it. So I think that 2013 really marks the year when the kind of the fulcrum of the political landscape shifted in favor of kind of LGBT. So we were no longer, we kind of won that moral argument. And so I think that last year, for instance, there was such excitement around that. And I think that you saw that first off with, who didn't change their Facebook and social media icons to, the HRC equality in red equal sign. I mean, that was just a shift. And then when you look at what happened with, all of these major brands diving into social media in a real compelling way, brands like Macy's and Betty Crocker, Coca-Cola, Tide, Hanes, they were all changing their, Facebook and Twitter postings to rainbow colors in support of and recognition of what was going on in the political landscape. So I think that when they do that in a visible way, and there were some really amazing things, Betty Crocker in particular did a whole great thing. It's about, they celebrate families. And so it's families making things together. And so they went out to local LGBT prides and celebrated gay families. And I think that really is a connection that, was meaningful. We worked with MasterCard last year because they had an Acceptance Matters campaign that was really about the fact that MasterCard is accepted in more places than Amex and American Express. And they decided to do a gay pivot on it because acceptance matters means something much different to LGBT.
Right.
So we worked with them on a huge social media campaign, and it was involved a social media contest. And it was really successful. And I think that that's really exciting in the times when you have mainstream brands that are not just kind of, I think that, years ago it was just like LGBT advertising was to check a box in a lot of cases. And now it's a core part of people's business strategy. So I think that the political landscape has meant that, they're not just questioning it, they're now just more figuring out how to do it in a real and lasting way. And one final example, last year was the first time that we had, Procter & Gamble, Gillette advertise with us. I mean, that's huge that, this this mainstream, iconic American brand, you know, kind of entered the market for the first time. And this year, you know, they're doing a campaign with us for Gillette Body, and they're featuring 5 athletes, and they reached out to us to do a gay athlete, and they're going to feature that in their mainstream advertising. So really exciting that, you know, again, we're being, you know, we're seen on the level playing field of a kind of a viable market, a vibrant market, and a brand loyal market. And you know, they're walking with us and moving their companies and their bottom lines forward through LGBT marketing.
One of the things that I thought was so indicative of many of our families now, which is fantastic, and I know that we all do not have the luxury of some of our family support, but that your sister had put up the honey maid on your Facebook, and how cool that response was. And I think that's one of the things that advertisers and the sort of business community are understanding, is that marketing towards the LGBT space is not just about marketing products and services to us, but it's also about using us as tastemakers and thought leaders with our families and friends, our neighbors and our colleagues, who look to us for ideas of what it is to consume, what to buy, our expectations around certain things, and also to see how it is that a brand is treating somebody's brother or their son or their friend or their neighbor. And those are the things that are really kind of resonating, I think, across a lot of the media spaces. And that Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Dome with the Prop 8, all of that has been very helpful. And when you look at the space and media, Jim, around storylines, are you seeing more storylines where you have families that are sort of taking this in a direction that sort of continues to expand on the message and the story of the changing landscape?
You're talking about on television shows?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Rich brought up The Fosters, which I think is such a great example, because that's showing kind of, this is what a family is today, or what a family can be today. You know, the fact that it's 2 women, it's their, you know, different races, and they did get married this last season. And it's, the nice thing about The Fosters is it's not the focal point of the show. It does come up as it would,
right, but
it's about a family. And I think that alone says so much without beating us over the head with a message. And I'm seeing more and more things like that, where you're seeing gay couples and people having kids, and you know, it's really a nice thing to see, because it is, like I said, becoming the norm.
Can you imagine when we were growing up if we had seen families on television that had a gay son or daughter, bisexual, transgender, in a family or in a neighborhood or as part of the cast of characters? What a difference for so many people across the country and the world it would have made in their quality of life.
Yeah, you know, you saw little bits of it, because I was a kid growing up in the 70s, and you would see like I can't remember if she was a transvestite or transgender, but on All in the Family, there was a woman who had a recurring character on there. And I remember being like 10 years old and Soap coming on the air, and there was such a big brouhaha over the fact that Billy Crystal's character was an out gay man. And even at 10 years old, I wasn't out yet, but I was so kind of interested in that. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one, but that was kind of the beginning. And I think it was like those little steps that we kind of had to take in the beginning led to the Will and Graces and, you know, the New Normal and shows like that, where it's, you know, the Fosters, all those shows. It's you know, progression, but it's a really great place where we are today.
At the GLAAD Media Awards in Los Angeles, what I found interesting, just from a historical perspective, was that GLAAD honored Norman Lear for some really groundbreaking work, and at the same time had Jennifer Lopez in the room where her show The Fosters was being honored for what sort of a new section of American family looks like. The Norman Lear work, why was that so important, Rich?
Well, I think Jim mentioned it. It came at a time when people didn't know what the word gay even meant or what transgender meant. So it really helped put a face and help define and educate people. I think many people in my generation, the first people they met who were LGBT came through the media. They were Will and Grace. They were on Queer as Folk or Melrose Place. And it helped, not only helped young LGBT people give them characters to relate to, but I think it had a huge impact in terms of growing acceptance among non-LGBT people of gay and lesbian families and people. Suddenly it wasn't about this amorphous idea or those gay people, but it's about Mitchell and Cameron, who are great dads and really likable people. It's about the couple on the Fosters who are struggling as a family, and you can relate to that when you're in your own family. So I think those images not only help LGBT people, but help overall acceptance of LGBT. And it's why at GLAAD we now are trying to push and advocate for even more groundbreaking images. And when it comes to transgender people, right now, trans visibility is where gay visibility was maybe 20 years ago. But when you have characters like Sophia on Orange is the New Black, played by Laverne Cox, it's helping to put a human face. We actually honored Laverne at the GLAAD Media Awards, and one thing that I love is that for the day after the GLAAD Media Awards, Laverne was the star and the celebrity that she is. She's now known as an actress and a superstar. She was on Access Hollywood. She was on E! Online. So what we do at GLAAD really, and especially with the GLAAD Media Awards, is use them as a platform to fuse pop culture and LGBT issues, and doing that in ways that are going to push the envelope. So by honoring a transgender woman of color and having Ellen Page give her the award, that video now has gone very viral and been reported on by mainstream sites, and I think really helped not only trans kids have someone to look up to, but everyday folks who are not transgender to kind of understand a little bit more about what it means to be trans.
Yeah, and GLAAD obviously is the expert in the space around those moments that had her mom and had Laverne on the red carpet talking about what was going on. I love that you guys brought out her mom to surprise her at the GLAAD Media Awards, because our families being there to support us is important.
It was my Oprah moment.
It was an Oprah moment. You made us cry. Thank you for that. One of the many Oprah moments at the GLAAD Media Awards. For those companies or organizations who are not necessarily as skilled in this space, people like Stephen Murray, whose job it is to work with advertisers in the marketing and public relations and advertising space. Stephen, can you talk to us about some choices to consider when marketing or advertising, publicizing content, any of that area, and talk a little bit about how it is that companies can be doing this in a authentic way? And it's a word that I think is really important for us to keep in mind when we're talking to new companies coming into space, that sometimes there's a fine line between patronizing and authentic in a way that will bring on your consumer enthusiastically when you're marketing to them or advertising them. What are some key choices to consider, Mr. Murray?
Yeah, I think that one of the first things we get a question about a lot is like, do I need to do gay creative? Or there's a concern about kind of what is the barrier to entry or not. And I think that the first thing that we work with advertisers on is advertising, if it's resonant and it has a real world meaning to anyone, it doesn't necessarily have to be gay creative. We're all, LGBT are extremely intelligent and brand loyal, and and they understand that messages, even running in gay media, is a way to kind of make a statement, and that they don't necessarily need to change anything about that. What we do educate people on is like working with HRC and making sure, first of all, that your HRC score is up to 100, and that there's a whole list of kind of the requirements for that. That's a good starting point that we suggest. And then while working, and you don't necessarily need to have the 100 score to begin, but it is at least something to work towards. And then as you're doing that, it's kind of reaching out. We work with an array of advertisers, and a lot of their creative is totally suitable for us. Sometimes they put on the HRC score or the HRC logo, and that's a good way to reach out. And then the next thing is, it's exciting to work with them to kind of figure out how to kind of overlay their brand message with the LGBT market. So for instance, with American Express, they have a Shop Small initiative where they reach out to local merchants and they celebrate local businesses. And we've been working with the American Express team to kind of really get more entrenched in kind of gay specific areas like Provincetown and P-Town, Palm Springs. We're going to be doing a 8 market initiative with them this year. And, you know, it really is about going into the communities, you know, meeting up with the merchants. We're going to be in pride parades everywhere, so watch out for us. You can't miss us. That's all I'll say. I won't give it away. But again, it's about kind of working with this team at Amex, and it's great in that, you know, we're working with an ERG group. So it's the LGBT group that we're working with that said, we want to make a difference in where we work. And they kind of reached out to us to do this, and we kind of worked with them to make this happen. And it's really exciting. And so I think that people, you know, if you're interested in it, you know, call any one of us. We're happy to kind of educate people about the market, because I think that the more advertisers, the more businesses are in this market, it moves the whole culture forward. Because certainly, as we know, in the US, businesses are driving a lot of these decisions, and when advertisers come in, you know, it's really effective.
Yeah.
So the ad, the creative and an advertising campaign featuring the LGBT community is something that's sort of evolving into a more reflective space. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so certainly a lot of our advertisers do gay specific creative, and that is great. You know, so and sometimes when they don't have gay specific creative, in the case of Gillette, we work with them to create the gay specific creative. Obviously, if it's something, you know, featuring a man and woman or a straight couple, obviously that's not going to work. But a lot of it, sometimes it's changing the taglines and things like that, because it's just about an evocative ad that's going to make sense for them. But I will just kind of echo the sentiment that it is exciting to see, you know, I think that a lot of companies, what I see them doing is reaching out in a mainstream way, like Coca-Cola is doing, I mean, just really amazing ads and kind of including gay families, or Honey Maid and things like that. So they're reaching out on a national level and getting these, you know, really reaching a huge audience. And then they're speaking specifically to the gay community in gay media. And so I think that that's a really powerful combination to kind of get widespread appeal on the allies and the advocates, and then kind of really speaking on a one-on-one terms with the LGBT consumer.
I had the pleasure of sitting down with some of our colleagues who work in another multicultural space in the Black community, and what they were saying was that, you know, when the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed, it was not an immediate change in the rest of culture. You didn't immediately see advertising campaigns that were reflective of the rest of the communities across the United States, and you certainly didn't see things across the media space. I think one of the things we've had as a huge advocate for us has been GLAAD for years. Jim, what kind of storylines do you see in the sort of calendar year coming up around LGBT images as it relates to authentic storytelling? I think you mentioned a couple of them. What are some of those storylines that you're seeing as an entertainment expert?
Well, one of the shows that's kind of new on the landscape is MTV's Faking It, which premiered last week. And that one, it's a high school in Texas of all places, but very progressive. And the theme of the show is that to be different gives you power and gives you popularity at the school. The most popular kid at the school is a gay character named Shane, played by Michael Willett, who you might know from GBF, the movie that was out last year. And the story starts out, it was funny because people really got worked up over the concept of the show, the fact that two girls realize if they pretend to be a lesbian couple, they can be more popular. But what the hook is at the end of the episode, they have to kiss in front of the whole school to kind of prove it. And you see that one of the girls, it's like her moment of like, oh, wow, I like that a little more than I thought. And part of the thread of the show will be her coming out and how she's going to deal with that with her best friend who doesn't know she's having these feelings, and how she connects with the Shane character. And he kind of helps her through this process. But the nice thing is that's not all the show is about, because they all have different romances and there's different things going out. But especially the fact that that's targeted towards young people, it's a very nice thing that we're going to see. And that's one of the big shows I think that will be getting a lot of recognition for that storyline and where they're going with it.
So I've got a question from Mark Umbach on Twitter for Rich along the same story, around the same question, which is, Rich, what things or trends are you seeing as it relates to images in the media space that are not necessarily being driven by GLAAD right now, but that you're seeing are coming as a result of the work that GLAAD has done?
Well, I think to get back to advertising, that's actually a really good example of that, where Chevrolet, we've mentioned that ad a few times, where it was just a montage of different families, and one of them happened to be two dads and who were raising a daughter. and that ran during the opening ceremonies of the Sochi Olympics. Or Coca-Cola, again, having a montage of American families. One of them is a gay family. I think that those two ads really, they also had a huge earned media component to them. So companies who are starting to push into this space are getting a lot of rewards for it. Those ads were shared crazy on social media. They were reported on widely in advertising industry press as well as LGBT media. And the backlash just isn't there anymore. It was 17 years ago when Ellen came out on her ABC sitcom, and JCPenney pulled advertising from the program. Fast forward to 2 years ago, where Ellen is JCPenney's national spokesperson, right, and they decide to stand behind her. This is like a good business decision for companies, but also if you think about the National Organization for Marriage as an anti-LGBT group working against LGBT families, they created a campaign after Starbucks came out for marriage equality called Dump Starbucks. That campaign received 46,000 people right now have signed on to that petition. On the flip side, someofus.org, a pro-LGBT organization, did a Thank Starbucks campaign, and that's received 650,000. So about 600,000 more people are thanking Starbucks versus dumping Starbucks. So it seems like companies are seeing that like the pushback is not there for being out and proud about being pro-LGBT. Right. In fact, they're getting rewarded for it in terms of mainstream media or in terms of social media shares.
It's one of the things that I hear and talk about when I go into meetings with different clients and different groups, is that should we be concerned about a backlash? And what I try to sort of point out is that there is no historical or analytical or historical evidence around any sort of backlash having been effective. Right. Why do you think that particular fear still exists in conversations, even with our most supportive of friends and allies?
I think it's starting to fade away as they see really all-American type brands like Coca-Cola, Chevy, Johnson & Johnson had a large campaign that they ran with PFLAG last year. These all-American brands are finding that being pro-LGBT is in line with their corporate values of inclusion. It's what's best for their own LGBT employees and what's best for their consumers as well. So I think that will continue to fade away, especially as organizations like National Organization for Marriage don't find success in terms of social media or mainstream media. The stories just aren't there anymore. Instead, you're seeing brands like Honey Maid, who received some tweets and some social media backlash when they had an LGBT inclusive commercial. But what I thought was really powerful was that Honey Maid not only stood by their decision to include that gay part of the commercial, but they also received way more support for it. People are really excited because this is new and cutting edge in advertising. And more and more, they're standing behind those brands that are standing behind LGBT people. If you think about some of the brands who have come out against marriage equality or who are not inclusive, they're receiving a lot of heat from mainstream press today.
Well, gentlemen, it's an exciting time that we live in. I want to, as we wrap it up today, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your insights with folks across the country. We are a better community and a better place because of the work that you're all doing. And if we can have each one of you just give a shout out to your .com so that people can learn and read more about the work that you're doing as you're moving forward. Rich, what's the organization's website?
Sure. We're at GLAAD.org, GLAAD.org, or at GLAAD on Twitter. And you mentioned the GLAAD Media Awards this Saturday in New York. Tickets are still available. Sponsorships are also still available. You could also follow hashtag GLAAD Awards for all the breaking news about who's winning and who's doing what.
Thanks. Jim?
The website is xfinity.com/LGBT. There's new interviews and coverage throughout the day, throughout the week, so keep an eye on that. And people can follow me at Twitter by my name, Jim Halterman, and also Instagram. And I'll be tweeting pictures from the red carpet at the GLAAD Media Awards this Saturday.
Awesome. And Stephen Murray?
Oh, I have a whole array, but I won't go through all of them. You can start at hearmedia.com, which has a list of all of our websites, and certainly advocate.com, out.com, outtraveler.com are the good place to start. And link to the bottom, scroll to the bottom, and it has all of our follow us information and the rest of our websites.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. For more information about more MWW Talks LGBT, please go to mww.com. There is an LGBT practice set up, and we are moving full force ahead. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.